Oh, monsieur, there's going to be a show tonight.
In a world where insanity reigns supreme and safety pin manufacturers are running out of metal for the diapers of the leftists, it's comforting to know an ancient, fat, long-haired, bearded reprobate has your mind in mind. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, and despite every attempt by the SHR Media Network to revoke his shameless contract, we return to the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon.
You're listening to Late Night Radio on the SHR Media Network. Caution, there will be mature themes explored and potentially adult language used. If conservatarian words, phrases, certain concepts, or rhetoric offends you, tune out now.
Uh-oh, guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Huh? Anybody? Julie, hey, guess what day it is? Oh, come on, I know you can hear me. Mike. What day is it, Mike?
Oh, you magnificent bastard, I read your book. I drink your milkshake.
How dare you?
I call that bold talk for a one-eyed fat man.
Fill your hand, you son of a bitch! Of course you realize this means war.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum.
Good morning, good day, good evening. It is the show. It is Thursday night, March the 11th, year of our Lord 2021. Got two guests here tonight. I'm not sure I like this chair. My chair got moved. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, where I'm broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, always spelled out with a K, mere 2 miles east of the locus of evil, on the entire left coast of Bill Mill, the belly of the beast, the Capitol building in downtown Sacramento at 10th and L Streets, and at the end of the show, when I exit the plush, resplendent, sumptuous, and palatial SHR Media Studios, I'll be smelling the odoriferous stench of sulfur, brimstone, and evil emanating from downtown Sacramento. Be forewarned, what you're about to hear for the next 2 hours consists of my opinion and my opinion only, no one else's. The saloon is serving stiff drinks, facts, history, logic, rationality, proportion, context, tradition, intent, and common sense out the front and the back doors, depending on the fear porn quotient, that is. Also, you got to remember this. Hey, stop that. Oh, now why am I hearing this? My board is messed up. Okay. Or the earphones are messed up. In any event, you're here in the saloon tonight. And, oh, I know why. I got this? Yeah, I got that going through. Okay. In any event, I have two guests here tonight. One is Lonnie Poindexter, and the other one is Jack Alexander. Jack is going to be here at the bottom of the hour because right now it's summertime. This is weird. I think I've discussed this before. It's summertime in Australia, the exact opposite of right now in the United States of America where it's winter. So he takes his kids to school and picks them up because it's awfully hot right now. And so we think of March awfully hot. What the hell are you thinking? Well, it's Australia and everything is reversed. Remember, when the water drains down the toilet here in the northern hemisphere, it circles the drain the exact opposite direction in the southern hemisphere. And a lot of people are thinking to themselves, self, because that's who you call yourselves, I don't believe that happens. Well, it's called the Coriolis effect, and I had to learn that with regard to taking a helicopter flight school. If you were listening this past Tuesday night, I began to take helicopters flight school, and then I didn't complete it, and blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of other stuff that went with that. Hey, if you go to and you think of it, if you're on Spreaker right now, folks, do me a grand favor and hit share on this. You can't hit Sonny. He's not around. He died in a skiing accident. But hit share. And then if you're watching me on Facebook Live, hit share on that, share and share and alike. And also if you happen to be watching on the YouTube channel, the SHR Media YouTube channel, share there as well. Sharing is caring. When I worked sex assaults, if you said something similar to sharing is caring, that was the nice way of saying, F you. Well, anyway, having said that, I have Lonnie Poindexter here tonight. Jack Alexander is going to be here at the bottom, and there's so much stuff to talk about. Oh, my God. Lonnie, are you there, sir?
Yes, I am, brother. I am here, and thank you again for inviting me to the saloon, man. Always an honor and a pleasure to be amongst my brethren.
It is always, again, a pleasure to have you, sir. There's so much going on, I almost don't know where to start. And actually, I do know where to start. If you haven't heard this, folks, this is a song that was sung over social media, and it's a song by teachers who are saying why they're not coming back to the classroom. And this one, you may have already heard this, but if you didn't have this already drilled into your head a couple of thousand times, well, let's have it drilled into your head another time by a teacher, if we will.
Believe that there's white privilege, please don't teach. If you don't believe that Black Lives Matter, please don't teach. If you don't believe in systemic racism and how it negatively impacts our students of color and don't want to help dismantle those systems, please don't teach.
Yeah. That's a white teacher, by the way, saying that. And I'm sure that she, whoever she is, has been exposed to just scads of white systemic racism. Lonnie Poindexter, I've wanted to ask you this for quite some time. Oh, and welcome to all the people that are in chat. Welcome to the Alaskan in chat and Sergeant Booker over in SHR Media chat. I wanted to ask you this, and when you were in front of me right here in the studio, I kept forgetting to, but let me ask you this, Lonnie Poindexter, since, well, hell, she brought it up. Is there systemic racism in the United States of America, Lonnie Poindexter?
Is there racism in the United States? I would say yes, because, there's evil in the land. Does it make any difference where you happen to be? Systemic racism is, I've always asked, define that term. What in the world does that mean?
Yeah.
Life's not fair is what I like to share with people who lack common sense. So if you're asking for an even playing field, you really need to take that up with the man upstairs, because one guy's tall, another guy's short. One guy's skinny, another guy's fat. You know, one guy carries a full head of hair and well into his old age. Some guys go bald before they're 30 years of age. Is that fair? Well, maybe not fair, but God is just, is what I always say, and the final arbiter in the affairs of man. Systemic racism is a new catchphrase that is used by the left and by left-leaning black folk to justify victimhood in their mindset. It chafes me. Well, this is a good quality show. I don't want to maybe say some things I'll have to apologize for because I'm trying to be a good Christian boy.
And a gentleman you are. A gentleman you are.
But I was having a conversation with an old classmate from high school earlier today, and we were sharing our childhood memories growing up in the community where we grew up in Southern California, and we grew up in a community that was primarily white and then became primarily black. But it was a community of middle class and upper middle class Americans. And we talked about how the homes we grew up in. He said, Lonnie, he says, I don't know about you, but I had my own room, and I even had a TV in my room. I said, well, I didn't have a TV, but I had my own room. I had my own bathroom. And so we're comparing who was more of the upstart. Never me. But the point that we were making was that there's a depiction of, because we happen to look the way we do with the darker paint job, that certainly our background should be one of more humble beginnings. Now, a generation prior, which would have been our parents' generation, I would agree with you and say yes. But certainly,
right.
We had advantages that, let's say, other people didn't have. And here's the kicker. We had advantages that even some of our white brothers didn't have, I know white folks that came from very humble beginnings, and they didn't have TVs in their rooms and have their own bedrooms. And so this thing of systemic racism asks to say that we, because we have the darker paint job, can't possibly succeed, is why you have an American biracial woman married to British royalty sitting in front of TV cameras being interviewed by a billionaire who happens to have the darker paint job, and they're complaining about, oh, how rough life is for them. It's tough out there being a billionaire.
All right, okay.
With that.
All right, okay. You opened that door, Lonnie Poindexter. Do you mind if I walk through it?
And you can charge through it, my brother.
Okay, thank you. Let me don my shoulder pads right now. There we go. Okay, you open that door. Anyone besides me, folks, see a little bit of irony where you've got Oprah Winfrey, who at one point, maybe still now, is or was the wealthiest individual woman in the world at one point. May still be, don't know. Sitting in Montecito, California, and you can look behind and you can see, oh, it's not a house, it's not an apartment. There isn't a balcony where they're looking down on the street below. Oh no, this is an estate. Or it's a friggin' golf course, one of the two. But it's as big, as a golf course. Because you can see hundreds and hundreds of feet beyond where they're sitting, and Oprah's on the right, and these two clucks are sitting on the left.
Yeah.
And they're both, one is some white dude, 6'5" white dude from British royalty, and another chick from the U.S. who decided to get married. And it's almost like a repeat of the the guy's dad. I can't think of the guy's dad, but he married Diana, and then ended up marrying, after Diana died in a car accident, ended up marrying the chick that he really loved all along, named Camilla.
Yep.
And then he got kicked to the curb because, he's supposed to marry Diana. Yeah, somewhere along in his brain, he was probably thinking, I hate to see her go, but now I can actually marry Camilla, who I wanted to marry in the first damn place. But the royals didn't want me to do that. And now you've got...
Camilla was a side chick.
Yeah, his sideshow. So Now you've got three immensely wealthy people talking about oppression.
Yeah.
Folks, does anyone see a little bit of irony in this besides me? Hello. Lonnie, I never got the whole Royals thing. I don't care about the Royals. Okay, I watched the Netflix series, The Crown. Mm-hmm. And I swear to God, folks, I watched all 4 seasons. The only thing that I drew out of all 4 seasons was these are desperately lonely people who don't know a thing about what it means to be a human, who have displayed consistently pretty much no emotions. They're raised in some kind of alternate universe, and because of that, they act as if they're in some kind of alternate universe.
They certainly do. Certainly do. It's ridiculous. But you know, when I think of Miss Markle, who married the prince, and now their disdain for everything relative to royalty and inherent racism within the royals and all this type of foolishness. Yet when you take into account the enviable position the gentleman that she married had in being a prince, and what good he could have done if he stayed within the realms of his station in life, in that if you look at the royals and what they've done historically in terms of in Africa and different places throughout the world with the needy and what have you, so much more could have been accomplished with him embracing his role. But he married a Hollywood chick from Southern California, and with all that left-leaning foolishness that goes along with it, and apparently he didn't have enough testicular fortitude, for lack of a better term, to stand up for himself. So, honey, we can do so much more. You married into this family. You can't marry me and try to pull me out of, and we could accomplish so much more. But this is Hollywood, and this is why you have a billionaire interviewing Bill.
Yes.
I look at this stuff and said, this is a clown show.
Yeah, does the irony not drip like the interior of a 12th century castle, at night? Does the irony not drip off the walls like that? Folks, do you not see this? Since we opened the door and I kind of walked through there a little bit, so I listened to another show on Wednesday and Sunday nights that generally deals with paranormal stuff, but also deals with, and they readily admit it, conspiracy theories.
Right.
And on their last Sunday show, they said, look at Oprah's ankle underneath her boot, one of her boots. And he says, it's bulging. See, there's a square right there. I haven't seen the picture yet. And
right.
I thought, he says, that's an ankle monitor because she's about to be arrested for her involvement in adrenochrome and what's been happening in D.C.
What? Really?
Oh. Listen, Lonnie, if you don't listen to this guy, you don't know half of what's going on in the United States and the world. So I'm listening to him say that, and I'm thinking, because it's entertaining and my wife likes to listen to this dude. He is remotely entertaining. I don't believe a fraction of what he says. However, so then I go on the internet and I'm thinking, I'm going to prove this guy absolutely dead wrong. That's just plain stupid. There's a square underneath her boot that you can see just above her ankle and below the top of the boot. It's a really long, dark boot. And I'm thinking, okay, so what would this be? It can't be an ankle monitor. That's just plain stupid. Come on. But if it's not an ankle monitor, what was she? Then I concluded, it has to be a double pack of cigarettes. Except Oprah doesn't smoke. And she's not wearing a white T-shirt, so she can't roll them up in the sleeve like you used to do in the 50s. So
maybe it's a packet of Skittles. She's already struggled with her weight.
Wait a minute. This is the first of the night. A packet of Skittles. Love that. Absolutely love that. So I'm thinking to myself, what is this? I don't know. I honestly don't know. But if you talk to certain personnel, they'll tell you, well, it's an ankle monitor. Not convinced, but I just, for whatever reason, that stupid foolishness just happened to pop into my brain housing group. I have, before we get into some serious stuff, I like to do this whenever I can. For the past 6 months or so, there hasn't been much because, hashtag because 2020, hashtag because 2021. But I actually have a bunch of stories tonight that fall into this category, and I'd love any of your comments along the way, Lonnie Poindexter. So I'm bringing you folks right now.
It's time for happy stories and good times.
This just came out today, and once I saw this, I went, woohoo, Oklahoma hit the lottery. And then you went to social media, and the left was absolutely imploding all along social media. BZ, what are you talking about? Well, this is from dailycaller.com. Headline goes something like this. Oklahoma passes bill to grant immunity to drivers who hit rioters engaging in violence. My first thought was, like Scooby-Doo. So this is what it says. The Oklahoma House passed a bill. It was yesterday, that extends punishments for rioters and grants immunity to drivers who injure or kill someone while fleeing a riot, USA Today reported. So on its face, there's a little bit more. HB 1674, introduced by a Republican named Kevin West, allows prosecutors to charge rioters with a misdemeanor for interfering with traffic and endangering drivers. Okay, I get that concept. But if passed, though, motor vehicle operators are not going to face criminal and civil charges for hitting a rioter, with this caveat: if they were fleeing for safety or exercised due care at the time of the injury or death. The bill defines a rioter as anybody committing violence or robbery during the protest, according to Courthouse News Service. Rioters can face a criminal charge and imprisonment. If any murder, maiming, I think this is from the bill directly, if any murder, maiming, robbery, rape, or arson was committed in the course of such a riot, such person is punishable in the same manner as a principal in such crime, the bill text says. Such person shall, upon conviction, be guilty of a felony punishable by imprisonment. But then it also makes the next obvious logical step is you generally have to be in fear of your life, and people are actually actively attempting to remove you from your automobile. The first thing that I thought of when I saw this, and I watched this live. I don't know where you were, Lonnie Poindexter. I was picking up my partner when I was working warrants, and two of us would work an unmarked car. And I was picking up my buddy Roger, and we saw at his house the L.A. riots unfold. And we watched there as Reginald Denny was pulled from his truck and struck with big chunks of concrete, like a concrete block and all sorts of stuff like that. And any time that I think now of rioters, and it doesn't matter, again, their paint job, black, white, pink, purple, burnt umber, if somebody comes for me in an automobile, I am in an automobile, and I am in my advanced age. Now, in my 20s and 30s, I would have gladly come out and kicked your ass for attempting to do this to me. These days, not so much. Not in my current condizione. That's condition in Italian. So as far as I'm concerned, any attempt to get into my car during a riot or riotous times, like what's been occurring this past, summer of hate in 2020, as far as I'm concerned, any attempt to get into my automobile during something like this where I'm attempting to get away, and I'm not partaking in the riot because that's stupid and I wouldn't, as far as I'm concerned, you're attempting to kill me, because anybody pulling me out of my car and beginning to pummel me, in my current advanced ageless, you're likely going to kill me. And if I'm not armed, you likely may. So I'm going to consider that the attempted application of deadly force against me. And I'm going to see, when your life is personally threatened in most states, parenthesis, I'm not an attorney, nor do I play one on the radio, end of parenthesis, you're justified, please see an attorney in your state and area, in using deadly force to save yourself. As I used to tell my trainees, if you're in an automobile and you're armed, your firearm is deadly force. If you get into a situation where you're inside the automobile, if your situation demands, can be used and applied as deadly force itself against someone who may be attempting to kill you by fill-in-the-blank means. So I find this a very unique bill. I'm not surprised that it came through in Oklahoma. And if I'm not mistaken, Lonnie, maybe you know better than me. Oklahoma did do this, and I think Florida either attempted to or recently passed a similar bill to protect drivers who were attempting to get away from rioters, with the intent, of course, being, and it's applied very sparingly and specifically, I would guess, that it has to be clear that people are attempting to pull you out of your automobile and that you're attempting to flee and you are not partaking in the riot yourself. Any thoughts about that, Lonnie Poindexter? Is Oklahoma moving in, and or Florida, moving in the right direction in something like that? And or, folks, ask yourself, Lonnie, ask you, anybody listening, unless you're 20 years old and an MMA artist, and a passel of individuals, forget the paint job, is attempting to surround your car, move it, break your windshield, break your windows, in what would appear to be a logical, clear-thinking individual, pull you from the car, and they're not going to shake your hand. Would you feel bad about trying to put it in D for drive and skedaddling, or would you just sit there and take it?
It's so funny you mentioned this. With a couple of things come to mind. First of all, is a word, and the word is common sense. This sounds like common sense legislation.
Yes.
To deal with an issue that has become prevalent across the country with this season of letting individuals run amok and hurt innocent people. I remember exactly where I was when the incident happened in Los Angeles with Reginald Denny. I remember that intersection well, because I traveled through there upon occasion over the years, because I grew up in Southern California, and to see that man yanked from his vehicle and beaten literally half to death was chilling, to say the least.
It was.
It was chilling, and so I'm actually working in South Orange County in the technology industry, and I remember the fear that it put forth through all of us, in particular my coworkers who happened to have the lighter paint job, because we all worked in sales and marketing, and so we were typically driving throughout the greater part of Los Angeles for a living, in terms of meeting clients and what have you. And the other thing that comes to mind is I remember back during my high school days, and boys being boys, me and two buddies decide we were going to tool up to a high school in an adjacent community to where we grew up, because we heard they had really good-looking girls there. So we drove one of them. I did not have a car yet, and the other gentleman that was with me that was riding along, we hadn't had cars yet, so there was an older classmate who had gotten his license, and his parents had just given him a 1965 Buick Riviera. It was mint condition.
Oh.
And so he was driving.
Beautiful.
And so we drove up to toward the high school, and before we got there, we ran into a pack of ne'er-do-wells, otherwise known as gang members, that recognized us as not being from that area. ignored us as they recognized us. We're at a stoplight at an intersection. And let me just say, one of the individuals wasn't Tookie Williams, but one of his peers who was equally as ferocious and deadly as Tookie was back during his prime in the latter part of the 70s. So long story short, we immediately realized that we were in the wrong part of town at the wrong time. We didn't think this through. And so these guys surrounded our automobile. I will never forget this. Now, I'm just a little punk kid. I'm 16 years old, sitting in the car, broad daylight, at an intersection, surrounded by gang members. We're not gang members. They were gang members, but they knew the high school that we were from. They had several choice words for us. They were calling us. And so it got testy as we're sitting at the light. Traffic's going back and forth. People are crossing the crosswalk in front of the automobile. And so we're screaming to our classmate, go, leave, man, don't leave us here with these fools surrounding the car. They were reaching in the automobile trying to snatch us out, of which we knew if they were able to pull any one of us out of the vehicle, they would have done to us what you saw done to Reginald Denny, because that's what was done back then. So long story short, we're screaming at him, go. One of the guys has my buddy that's in the front passenger seat, has him by the shirt and is yanking on him, and he's halfway out of the car now. I'm grabbing him, trying to pull him back in. And so Michael, who was driving, said, Michael, please, man, go. So Michael finally nails it, and he tagged about 2 or 3 of the gang members as we drove through. And being that he was a good kid, raised by good parents, after he bumped them with the car, it knocked him a few feet. He stops and shouts out the window, I'm sorry, man, I'm sorry. Because he was raised right. And anyway, we drove off and we kept our lives, or at least the better part of our youth, and went on to live another day. But it just goes back to speak to the common sense again. I mean, we needed to go, and whether it was, okay, do we hit a couple of these guys as we flee the area, or do we stay there and get beat to death, literally, and beat half to death? And so we chose the former, and we took off, and we lived up to breathe another day. These laws that in Oklahoma, and it makes sense to me. Oklahoma's that kind of state. You know, part of my family is from Oklahoma, and so I have nothing but good things to say about that state. And other states need to probably follow suit and locales, because now that we have yours truly in office, and I don't know if you caught his speech today, but I was able to listen to it because I had no choice, because you know what my situation is here.
I do, and I'm sure you did. I could see you.
I'm eating dinner, and I'm going, I got to watch this. I'm going to eat. So, I have much to say about that, but anyway, just to finish up, yeah, man, it's common sense. I remember that. I've been out of high school a long time, and I remember that like it was yesterday. And, to run across fate in a way that, things could go very, very bad for you if you are not decisive and you act accordingly. And we sure did, man. We bumped about 2 or 3 of those guys, and thank God we didn't run over the top of any of them. The Buick Riviera has that nice front end, so it just bumped them and tossed them about 4 or 5 feet.
Well, yeah, and you wouldn't want to hurt that car either. It's a good thing you didn't hurt the car. Because, folks, if you have ever seen a 65 Buick Riviera, it's beautiful. It's
a
gorgeous. God, I'd kill to have one of those things today.
I know he was the envy of the high school. We're like, your dad gave you his pride and joy? What kind of grades did you get? And so we were to drive on through there. It's interesting. Another interesting story tied to that. The guy that was the one of the gang member leaders was a guy named Jamal, and Jamal was, he was like Godzilla, just like Tookie was in Los Angeles during that time. And these guys would get arrested and get locked up, go off to prison or jail, get let out, and they look like the Hulk when they come out of there, right? Because they lift weights. And so I had heard through a friend of mine that went into law enforcement, one of my classmates, who gave me some stories that he knew firsthand about Tookie Williams and Jamal. Well, Jamal, praise God, it must have been his grandmother or his mama or somebody in the family praying for that boy. So he had a spiritual renewal while he was locked up, whatever the other time was, because he was in multiple times. And he came out of prison and he had found Christianity. So as the story goes within the church community in the greater Los Angeles area, is that Jamal knew Jesus now. As we're all, thank God, because he was terrorizing us through our entire childhoods, right? So he knew Jesus. But here's the caveat to that. He loves the Lord now, and he's sharing the Bible with everybody. And if you meet him on the street, he's still, Herculean and huge as a weightlifter and a bodybuilder. But he knew Jesus now, so he would talk to people doing outreach in the community about they need to come and know the Lord and know Jesus like he did. The problem was he still had some of his old gangland days in terms of his attitude. And so if you did not come to Jesus by him witnessing to you, he would get mad and beat you up. So, everybody was suspicious from that. Are you serious? Yeah, Lonnie, he hadn't learned that part yet, that, if they don't come to Jesus, you got to pray for them and let them go like they did him. He would get mad and he would beat you up. So that's my story about that time of my child. I was a 70s kid, so, I grew up in the latter part of the 70s in Southern California.
That's right. You're thumping courtesy of the Lord.
Yep.
It doesn't get any better than that. Hey, for folks that don't know who Tookie Williams is, he basically was the leader of the entire Crips gang. Dude was born back in 1953. He died in San Quentin in 2005 at the age of 51, eradicated, I believe, but by one of his own similar individuals. Stanley Tookie Williams was about as wide as he is tall, and he had what is a classic CDC prison bodybuilder's build. Is from the waist up, he was huge, because bodybuilders in the joint don't do anything with the legs. So he was a massive, massive dude. He was a street monster. So that's who Tookie Williams is. I'm about 5 minutes late. We're going to do this and be right back. I'm BZ. That's Lonnie Poindexter, my co-host for tonight. And you're in the saloon right now. Come on back.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Hey, are you guys listening? This is Shannon from Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM on SHR Media. I know you've been wondering where we are and what's been going on. Well, folks, that's right. We're back. So please join us 7 to 9 a.m. Monday through Thursday on SHR Media, on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and Spotify, and Facebook Live at 11 a.m. on Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM at Facebook. You don't want to miss a minute. We've got lots of guests, lots of segments, and lots of interesting things. And let's face it, there's nowhere for you to go, so you might as well tune in. Again, Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM. We're back live on the air on SHR Media, 7 to 9 a.m. Monday through Thursday, audio and Facebook Live, audio and video. Yes, we are going to do video. Facebook Live, Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM. Hope to see you soon.
Unleashed Jeremy Hansen, the most explosive pro-American podcast on the planet. Pro-MAGA, pro-Trump, pro-conservative. Come join the resistance. Fight for what really matters in America. 5 p.m. Central on UJHLive.com, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Pandora, or MAGABook.com. Come join the resistance and fight for America. Unleashed Jeremy Hansen.
Do you value yourself, your family, your friends? Want to know more about how to survive, thrive, and stay alive in these dynamic times? Listen to Around the Campfire with Kate, Thursday nights and Sunday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Central, only on PSN TV. That's Around the Campfire with Kate. News that nobody in the MSM wants to report. Remember, train hard, train smart to survive, thrive, and stay alive.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And we are back. You're in the saloon. BZ's, the Bloviating Zeppelins Berserk Bobcat Saloon. I have a radio show. You're listening to it. Now, you can listen to the show if you go to shrmedia.com, and on the first page where it says listen and chat, click that. You'll go into the chat room. Bunch of great people in the chat room right now. Mike is there, Alaskan. Sergeant Booker, Leslie is there. So go there. If you want to watch the show, it's streaming live right now on two venues. And that would be the SHR Media YouTube channel, as well as the SHR Media Facebook page. I'm still on Facebook. I don't know how. I'm still on YouTube. I don't know how. But nothing succeeds like success, or as I was told many years ago, nothing exceeds like excess. Tonight I'm talking to Lonnie Poindexter, who is my co-host, and I have got an absolute plethora, lots of good positive stuff. And also, Jack Alexander is here with me tonight. Jack, are you there, sir?
How are you doing, BC? Hi, Lenny.
Excellent. Lonnie, this is BZ. Lonnie, this is excuse me, Jesus. All right, back up. Would you guys rewind the tape just for a second? Rewind the tape. Okay, play back the tape. Okay, Lonnie, this is Jack. Jack, this is Lonnie. Shake hands and come out fighting. All right.
Jack, how you doing, brother?
So thanks for being here tonight. Now, I asked Jack to be here for a very specific reason. I want to go through the happy stories first before we get there, because something unique happened to Jack. I don't want to Bigfoot his story, so I won't tell you what it's about, because we'll get to Jack to do that. Jack, basically we did is Oklahoma passed a law that said essentially if people are trying to pull you out of your car, you can go and run them over. So because it's the beginning of the second half hour, just to remind people what we're into right now, it's this essentially. Hello, producer. There we go.
It's time for happy stories and good times.
So here's the second story that falls under that, and we're gonna make these bad boys fall like cards, crazy. This is from ABC News. Texas federal judge rules CDC's pandemic eviction moratorium is unconstitutional. And perhaps at first glance, people may be thinking, wait. Let's see. A federal judge has ruled the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's pandemic eviction ban is unconstitutional. The CDC's pandemic eviction ban. Anybody see a problem with that besides me? Lonnie? Jack?
You think?
Since when?
I mean, when did the CDC become a law enforcement agency?
Exactly, thank you. Because when I watched this story on TV and then read social media about it, people were saying, well, people shouldn't have to pay their rent. Okay, but since when does the CDC create laws? So this is a federal judge actually doing the right thing. This also, that's a cool story. Next story. Oh, the places you'll go and the things you'll do. This might be a problem with a capital P, and that rhymes with P, and that stands for pool. This is out of Fox News. Manchin says he'll never change his mind on the filibuster. Progressive Democrats see the filibuster as an outdated relic. Well, what does that mean? The Democrats occasionally have their own version of, like Jeff Flake, and I can't think of the newest dummy that is now a rhino. But, think Jeff Flake, think Mitt Romney, think John McCain, that sort of thing. The Democrats kind of have their own equivalent. One of them is Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia. So a lot of people are saying this, and I find this interesting. This is where I'd like the two of you to weigh in. They're saying right now, Joe Manchin might be the second most powerful politician in the U.S. because he was asked if he would ever waver in his support of the procedural tool known as the filibuster. And he said, never. He said, never. This is a quote. Jesus Christ, what don't you understand about never? Meaning, he's never going to go for the removal of the filibuster. How hated is that guy right now, do you think, Lonnie?
You know, I'm thinking that if he happens to go out for drinks with any of his brethren, if they order a drink for him, you better have somebody do a taste test before he consumes it, because I think he's put himself square within the crosshairs of those who, well, let's just say they don't have our worldview.
No, it's like, dude. Number one, I'm really glad for that federal judge with the CDC ruling, and Joe Manchin about that. There are actually a bunch of good things that are occurring these days, which is why I want to bring this to the forefront. But Joe Manchin, it's like Murkowski and Susan Collins. They can generally be counted on to side, not necessarily with Republicans. Manchin either has his own huge problem within the caucus, or he really is the number 2 politician in D.C. right now, right behind Pelosi, because like all those 5-4 decisions when Kennedy was the breaker, the slayer of dragons and the breaker of chains, Manchin might be the dude upon which every vote counts now, even including Cammie Harris, who's sitting in the VP seat.
Yep.
So this could be a bit of a cat turd in the punch bowl for the Democrats these days, gentlemen.
Yeah,
I think that I think this judge is only marginally liked marginally more than Donald Trump at the moment.
Yes. That's true. Anyway, I see some interesting times for Manchin, and the reason I bring this up under Happy Stories is, folks, again, what did Rush Limbaugh had a quote that he used to say every once in a while, and I would care to echo it. I don't know the exact quote, but I'll paraphrase something like this. Do not despair. Folks, when you think it's time to despair, stop, take a breath, stand back, and get the big picture of it all. It's really easy to say all is terrible, everything is rotten, and we are all doomed. But the reason that I bring Happy Stories to everybody is a reminder of, no, that ain't necessarily the truth. That isn't necessarily the truth. And I would submit this as well. The Democrats and the leftists, ably abetted by the propaganda arm of both the American media maggots, are in what I call PSH right now, which is pants-shitting hysteria. The reason for that is 2022 and House elections are next year.
Yeah.
Next year. And the reason you're seeing all of this insanity right now from them is they only have a slight window into which they absolutely must shove all this crap, or potentially by next year, all is gone. So they either remove the filibuster right now, stack everything, shove as much junk through as under executive orders as humanly possible, which is why you're seeing all this ridiculous stuff getting shoved through. Or, Lonnie and Jack, am I absolutely wrong on that?
I think you're
yeah, exactly.
Because if they don't do it now, and I think, yeah, it is PSH, but it's also kind of like the cornered dog, cat, or rat theory. Nothing is more frightening or potentially dangerous than an animal that is cornered. And I would submit to everybody right now, the Demorats are cornered animals. And just when they want you to think that they are in total control, there is nothing that has been left to chance. They are operating not from common sense and not from a sense of I'm doing what's right for America. They're operating under the massive umbrella of fear. They are fear biters.
And I think they're really pushing this at the moment to get as much of this craziness through. So, not if, but when Joe Biden loses the last of his marbles, and let's face it, there ain't too many of those left.
No,
they can turn around and say and campaign on the idea. Well, they can blame it all on Joe Biden as if they had nothing to do with it. That was Joe Biden's fault, and he's now not in the picture. They'll force him to step down and think they can sweep all of that manure that they're concocting out the door with Joe Biden. So they're trying to get all the shit in that they can.
Well, as I've said, it's because their window of opportunity is so relatively small right now. And though you may not think so, folks, as I indicate, don't despair. All is not lost. Lonnie Poindexter, I don't think you feel that way. All is not lost, is it, Lonnie?
Well, you know me, guys. I'm a eternal optimist, and so I'm always seeing the glass as half full as opposed to half empty. And so, no, all is not lost. I have fortunate enough to have some people a lot smarter than me that I spend time around. Gentlemen like yourself, BZ, and my new friend from down under as well. And when I talk to those folks smarter than me, and many of them are clergy, because I figure there's always a spiritual component to whatever's taking place.
Right.
And they pull me aside and say, you need to understand how God does things. And right when you think it's all going to hell in a handbasket is usually when you see him move, and he moves in a way that causes those who have evil agendas to, and always accuse, whatever they're accusing us of is the thing that they're doing, right?
Yes.
That they get exposed and their tomfoolery gets completely exposed. And so I think that you hit the nail on the head, both you gentlemen, as you speak on this particular point here, and that's what encourages me, because they are emboldened because they think that they have it all lined up and all worked out, and it's going to go the way that it's going to go, including, and I'll just touch on this for an instance, because I was watching the speech today, and the thought that came to me is what this guy is really saying is there'll be vaccines for everybody. And then what he's really saying is vaccines for everybody, if you get my drift. And you're going to have to line up to get indoctrinated, if you will, with the vaccination, because it's all part of the agenda. This thing comes back to something somebody educated me on, which is the Great Reset. And I know you gentlemen are familiar with that.
Yes, sir.
With that term.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all part of that. And so do we just sit back and have to take it? Or if Common Sense America, those of us that have our particular worldview, is God for us or against us? And I would say God is for us, and he's the final arbiter in the affairs of man. Don't get it twisted. This rock that we live on called the earth was created by him. We don't own nothing. We just rent space on it. And so if we continue to do what we're doing, like your show, BZ, and I can't speak highly enough about your show, and also SHR Media and the valuable tool that it has been in getting common sense information out to people so they can understand what's really going on. we win in the end, as the good book says, but we also we will win most of the big battles as well as we trudge on toward greater victory. So I guess I'm sounding like a preacher on a soapbox right now, behind a pulpit. But that's how I see it. So I'm excited, and I'm very, very optimistic.
Well, if Jack, you talked about this. This is kind of your watch phrase, if I'm not mistaken. These elections since 2016 and beyond, particularly now, aren't just about Republicans and Democrats.
Right.
Because frequently there isn't a damn dime's worth of difference between the two. And I'll get to a story on that a little bit later on tonight, I hope, if there's time. So, in my opinion, and it's no shock that I believe in God, this is for the soul of America. This is for the soul of man, capital
Preach,
M,
brother.
capital M. This is literally good versus evil. Sometimes things really are this clear. And I'm sure on the opposite end, the leftists feel that they have, I don't know, whatever piece of crap they worship, the climate. Maybe they've got the climate behind them, pushing them. Okay, nifty for you. But it is right versus wrong. And it distills down to its most base, in my opinion, as good versus evil. I never, ever in my mind could conjure up the fact that a fraction of the crap that's getting passed or suggested or pushed through right now, we would even remotely see in the United States of America. And Jack, that's your watch phrase.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, you see it every day. I mean, you just look at California. I was listening to you and your guest earlier in the week, and I'm thinking, how typical of California to have a drive-in porn theater. And you look at
it's true.
And I sort of look at what's going on, especially on the West Coast there. I mean, California are legalizing pedophilic sex. I think it was Washington State have now legalized the recreational use of Class A contraband narcotics, heroin, cocaine, all that sort, methamphetamine, all that sort of stuff. And they just keep pushing the limits that there is no end to the depravity. The Democrat Party, as I said on one of my shows this week, is the party of dangerous, despotic, depraved individuals, and that's their goods that they're selling. They're selling depravity. They're selling dangerous ideologies, which history has already shown doesn't work.
They're not.
We keep asking them. Point out one socialist nation that has been successful, and they say, they'll pick somewhere like Finland or somewhere like that. No, it wasn't successful. They've gone back to a more capitalist.
Right, and they're not exactly socialist. They'll tell you they're not socialist. Very frustrating.
And every time I hear a Democrat drop the D word when they're talking about the United States, I want to pick up the thickest copy of the Constitution I can and bitch slap them 6 ways from Sunday and then hand it to them and say, show me where in this hallowed document the United States is described as a democracy. I've looked. I can't find it. But hey, I'm dyslexic. I might have missed it. So here's your chance. Even on my show, I offered up to give $500 to any of the Democrat political campaigns in the last election cycle $500 if they could point out where in the Constitution the United States is a democracy. You know how many took them up on that? I still got the $500.
You did.
Put it that way.
You did. You actually did it. Number one, oh hell yeah, I would collect. Quite frankly, I'm surprised they paid.
Well, they say that where it says we're a democracy is in the same part of the founding documents where it says that there's a separation between church and state.
Right, exactly. Oh,
yeah, that's another one.
Bingo, that's it.
Yeah.
Hey, folks, I got to take a break. I'm BZ. Jack, hang on just for a second. It's Jack Alexander. It's Lonnie Poindexter. It's BZ. You're in the saloon. Be right back after this. Come on.
You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Why can't I get a producer? Jeez.
It is he that is me, bringing perspective from across the sea. Join me, Jack Alexander, 4 days a week for the Jack Alexander Experiment podcast, as I take a unique outsider's look at the news and issues affecting life and liberty here in the USA. I'll show you what the mainstream media refuses to. Politics, border security, defense, healthcare, travel, nothing is off limits. Catch the Jack Alexander Experiment podcast each Monday to Thursday on Facebook, YouTube, and everywhere good podcasts can be found. Also, check out the website www.jackalexanderexperiment.com.
It's your business diva here, Melanie Collette. I am inviting you to a front row seat as I discuss some of the most intriguing details of wealth and finance with today's movers and shakers in the world of business. Listen in and discover financial truths on a global, domestic, and household scale. Uncover topics that will impact your wallet today and in the future. Money Talk with Melanie airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. East, 2 p.m. West, right here on SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio. You can't afford to miss it.
After 6 years covering terror and corruption, the Unpleasant Blind Guy is making a change. I'm Dave Milner. Join me on Spreaker and YouTube through SHR Media and on the Western Free Radio Network as I team up with Jeff Mitchell, host of the English Defense League radio show on blogtalkradio.com. Check show pages for airtimes. It's the Unpleasant Blind Guy.
On EBL Radio.
There's
no surrender, ever.
Because truth is not always pleasant.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. I'm BZ. You're in the saloon. Tonight, my co-host is Lonnie Poindexter. Over on the right, there in the corner, he has flown in all the way from Australia to be here tonight. It was a long 14-hour flight, and boy, are his arms tired. It's Jack Alexander. And also, I want to tell you this. I have a couple of new musical pieces to play, some new music to play for everybody next week. And no, it's not me farting into a leather chair. Okay, so just disabuse yourself of that right now. That's not what is going to happen. But I have a couple of cuts that I'm going to find very interesting. Here's the next story. This also, where have I been? Jack Alexander. Why? Okay, here we go. Why haven't we heard this? For one thing,
it's a magical step into the future. Tomorrow's news today with Australia's Jack Alexander here in the Berserk Bobcat Saloon.
Look at that. Jack even has his own intro. But what were we talking about, folks? We were talking about this.
It's time for happy stories and good times.
Here's another one because, my God, there would be no hypocrisy on the planet if it weren't for leftists, Democrats, and the American media maggots, what I call the LDAM. This is a great story. I just love stuff like this. Berkeley, and again, it's just the Schadenfreude drips heavily off of this. Berkeley Teachers Union president caught dropping off kid at in-person private school despite fighting against reopening schools. Oh, if that's glorious. Matt Meyer is the president of the Berkeley Federation of Teachers. It's the union that represents public educators in the notoriously liberal city. Oh, the Blaze, you're being so kind. And has staunchly fought against reopening schools until all teachers have received the coronavirus vaccine. But that didn't stop this dude, Matt Meyer, from taking his own daughter to a private school operating in person. Okay, enough of that. Do I have more? Oh, God, do I have more. Here's another one. I've got so much of this stuff, I might have to move ahead. Let's have leftists attack the language again. Shouldn't we? Why not? This is from the Times, the UK Times. The headline reads, breastfeeding is now chest feeding. Why are the language police trying to wipe out women? To placate the angry, vocal few, one sex is being written out of the lexicon. And then the author of this says, it must stop. When designing the Constitution, America's founders feared democracy's natural pitfall, the tyranny of the majority. Well, weren't we just talking about that, guys? Democracy versus a republic? The United States of America is a constitutionally federated republic, a CFR. I learned that from Professor Michael Jones, a constitutional scholar, whom I've had on the show quite a number of times. The creators were leery of the ignorant masses, and originally voting was pretty much restricted to landowners, but a competing danger, the tyranny of the minority, is arguably worse, at least when majorities tyrannize, a large number of people get what they want. So in the West's, and you'll notice this is in the West, in the West's current frenzy of inclusivity, it's often majorities whose wishes are at risk of being ignored. Most recently, non-trans people, and in particular, women, if he can still use that word. So now, in the UK, to be more inclusive, which is actually exclusive, breastfeeding is now chest feeding. Any brief comments, Lonnie and or Jack? Because there's so much. I still got to move on. But any thoughts, either of you, two spectacular gentlemen?
Well, I had to chime in when you said that breastfeeding has been redefined as chest feeding.
You can't write this. You can't write this.
You can't make this stuff up. So now what they're saying is, now that it's chest feeding, that means that, and I don't know if you've seen the YouTube memes that speak to this. These individuals who are they're males defining themselves now as females, and adopting children. I saw one thing, and you had to wash your eyes out with bleach of some male guy breastfeeding a child. This is, you can't make it up.
No.
You can't. I don't know where to even start with this. Well, let me just comment. Talking about Berkeley, and I remember having worked and lived in the Bay Area for a number of years. We used to affectionately call Berkeley Berserkly, and I don't know if they still have that in mind.
Exactly. No, I used to do that. I used to call it Berserkly, even though one of my favorite Italian restaurants was on University. I used to love to go to Giovanni's over there. Berserkly, it's nuts. Well, it was nuts in the 70s. It's even nutsier, if that's a word, now.
It was nuts in the 80s, and just to illustrate for our listenership out there is Berserkly, and specifically the university there, had a student. This was back in the mid-80s. You might even remember this, BZ, who decided that he was going to attend school butt naked. I mean,
no, I missed that one.
So for the better part of semester, or a good portion of his, because he was a freshman or a sophomore, if I remember, liberal parents, obviously.
Right.
He decided that he was going to class but naked because that's how he wanted to express himself.
Right.
So he did that, not one day, ladies and gentlemen, not 2 days, not a week. He did this for an entire portion of the school year, and the leadership at the university were at their wits' end trying to figure out how to deal with him because they did not want to squash his individuality and all the things that go along with this kind of crazy mindset. So here's what they came up with. I will never forget this. They finally were able to, they thought, to get him to stop coming to school naked. I mean, the only thing, folks, that he had on was some flip-flops in his backpack. And so to get him to stop, they said, it's a health hazard. That's why you can no longer do it, because you're naked behind sitting on a bench or a classroom seat. Who wants to come behind you? So here's what he did.
Oh, I just got the mental thing of that. Oh.
Wait a minute, my brother. It gets worse. So his response to them was he started wearing a loincloth, but it only covered his backside. His frontal area is still completely, so when he would sit down, there was a piece of material between his butt cheeks and the chairs. Only can happen at Berserkly. That's how they roll there.
Oh my God! I'm sorry. I apologize because I don't have a producer. I'd forgotten that I have this too. As a matter of fact,
Tales from the You Can't Write This Shit department, graciously presented by BZ here in the Berserk Bobcat Saloon.
because quite frankly, as we all know, you can't write this shit.
You can't.
It's just, I say this so many times, and sooner or later, I guess I'm going to have to stop saying it. We used to say this about once every month or so. Boy, you can't write this. And then it got to be once. Now it's every day. It's every damn day. Here's another happy story. This.
Well, before you go into that, I think I should link in my little story.
Okay.
Because it's so closely related to all of this. Now, as some of the listeners know, I'm going through some health problems at the moment, and I'm in and out of hospital tests and the doctors and whatever. I get sent for an X-ray this week.
Oh, this is perfect. This is the perfect time for that, Jack. Thank you. Wait. This is the perfect time. And this. Yes, exactly.
So I hand the referral over to the gay Muslim man that greeted me at reception, which was ironic in itself.
Yeah, just a hair.
And it turned out he was also going to be my X-ray technician.
Okay.
So we, finally, calls my name. I go in after waiting probably 10, 15 minutes. And like they do when you give blood or, have an X-ray, name, date of birth, address, that sort of, all of those usual patient identifiers. And then the clanger dropped. Do I self-identify as a woman, and do I believe that I am pregnant? Because I wouldn't be able to have the X-ray if I'm self-identifying as a pregnant woman.
Okay, now, the first time you told me that's one of the reasons that I wanted to have you here tonight, Jack, is because you told me that, and it took a couple of seconds for me to digest and process what you just said. But having known that's what you were going to say tonight in the interim, I thought, well, wait a minute. Couldn't this backfire? Because what if the technician, what if you needed whatever you were going to take desperately, and let's say that without having taken the MRI or whatever it was, you wouldn't have been diagnosed and potentially you could die. So what does the hospital or a medical exchange like that do when the patient says, I can't take that because I identify as female, plus I identify as a pregnant female because that's how I feel this week. And then the person who's been instructed to do so says, okay, you're right, you don't need that. And then you die. So then what do? How stupid is this? Does no one think beyond an inch beyond their nose? That's just stupid. And they're going to kill people.
Yeah, needless to say, I made it very clear to him that he should have understood doing biology classes. I'm quite sure X-ray technicians have to pass some sort of tertiary level biology studies. After all, they've got to know where to point the radiation beam. That, after those studies, he should know that scientifically there are only two biological genders, and that anyone claiming some sort of gender dysphoria, it has a severe mental illness and should be treated as such, not pandered to. Well, yeah. I got a funny feeling that he won't be X-raying me again.
Yeah. Can I?
He found my response rather offensive.
No. Oh, you mean you confronted him with, excuse me, let's talk about either XX or XY, because that's what it gets down to, really, when you think about it.
I slapped him with reality.
You're going to leftist hell, Jack. That's
I'm already there.
Really all
I'm already there.
I have so many happy stories, I don't even know if I'm going to get to the two stories that I really want to get to tonight. I'll have to cut through the clutter. Here's another story that just came out. This is from, by the way, if folks, you're looking for someone who's an actual journalist, because you really don't, you could count the actual journalists on maybe one hand, 5 fingers of one hand.
And have fingers left over.
And have fingers left over. Yes, exactly. One of the people that I highly recommend going to, besides John Solomon at justthenews.com, is Sarah Carter. She's got sarahacarter.com. She wrote this, and I think this is a happy story. A one-term president, voters don't see Biden getting a second term, poll finds. So as I indicated at the beginning of the show, does this indicate that maybe a strata of America is starting to become left woke in terms of they're beginning to see, I don't think this is coming out all that well, because now we're 51 days into the Biden administration, and already people are saying this. So thoughts about Biden, thoughts about Biden making it to the end of 4 years, Lonnie and Jack?
I don't think he's going to make it to 4 years.
No.
I think when I stomach watching him on TV, watch his eyes, and they're usually a good indication of what's going on or what's not going on with someone. And so I think, as some other folks have stated, that they plan to continue to use him as a proxy, if you will, until. But what I don't know is, folks are saying that the VP will then be, and I cringe to think of Kamala Harris running the show. But I don't have a good indication of, what's the game plan if he doesn't make it through 4 years? Would it be Kamala steps in, or does he make it to 4 years? They continue to prop him up, and then they'll have someone else coming from their ranks who's stepping up to run, and that's the part I'm still gray on.
I shouldn't have to say this, but I think it's so obvious, and I pre-qualify by saying, obviously, come on, folks, I'm not a doctor, but I'm also not stupid. And there's a reason that the Democrats are not allowing, even tonight, when did anybody see the speech by Biden tonight? Lonnie, I know you saw it. You said you had. It was, what would you say, maybe 10 minutes at the most, if that?
They said that the prevaricators on the liberal news show said it was 20-something minutes.
Okay.
I didn't think it was that long.
I didn't think it was that long either, but let's say they're correct. At the end of the 20-minute time, again, he turned around. People are shouting at him. People, journalists that are there in front of him, in front of the podium, behind the camera, start shouting questions. He turns around and walks away. He doesn't take questions because I submit he cannot speak well extemporaneously because he's not all present. And I shouldn't have to think this. Well, one of the first things that I was conjuring was, I wonder how much drugs are on board him right now to keep him cogent and awake. And also, I wonder, what's their nature and what variety and how many milligrams? And were they injectables?
And where do you get them from? Where do you get them from? Because I could use them at the moment dealing with all of this random fatigue.
But to think that I have to think this about the president of the United States. I said this, and I still wonder. First I was joking. Now I'm fairly serious. I said last year, I'd love to take a blood test of Dr. Fauci, Dr. Anthony Fauci. I'd like to find out what's coursing through this guy's blood. Because you know what I bet it is? I bet it's hydroxychloroquine and maybe a Z-Pack choodling around in his blood. I bet he takes hydroxychloroquine. I'd love to know what's in the blood of Joe Biden. Because clearly he has good days and bad days. His two best days so far have been the last debate with Trump, and you can't convince me that he wasn't subject to various injectables. To have to think that about the President of the United States. And you cannot convince me that he was laboring under perhaps various either per mouth or injectables so that he could be sufficiently cogent for, and I'll give them the time, for 20 minutes tonight. But at the conclusion, he turns around and walks away.
Yep.
And we're being told, well, that's not true. He's just fine. Are you kidding?
I don't think he's going to make it the 4 years. I think they're going to replace him after the primaries, but before the midterm election.
Yeah.
Or more to the point, he will step down. They'll convince him to step down. And there's a story that I covered, I think it was Monday. There's now rumblings going around that he will step down, Camilla will see out the last 2 years, and that Jill Biden is the designated champion for the Democrat Party in 2024.
Really? I'm typing this in chat right now, and I've said it before. I started saying it last year when I began making my various observations about Joe Biden. I haven't finished in setting it in chat, but basically what I'm saying in chat is, I kind of feel bad for Joe Biden, but I don't feel bad for Jill Biden. I think Jill Biden, his wife, is the devil's spawn. She, in the most craven, cynical fashion imaginable, put what I believe she knows as a dementia-addled, at least onset Alzheimer's individual out on Front Street because she was either listening to him tell her, I demand to be president, or she was pushing him from behind. She's filling in his sentences. An actual, honest-to-God, in that situation, wife would have counseled her husband, maybe it's time to let someone else do that. Why don't we just retire and enjoy what we have while we have it? But to be so cynical, and everybody knows it, no one wants to say it, the emperor has no clothes. Translated, the emperor has no mind. He has no mind. Now, if even an infinitesimal fraction of things that he's done or not done had occurred under the Trump regime by Trump, you would never have heard the end of it. You would never have heard the end of it. So, again, I reiterate, this entire show is 2 hours of my opinion. I'm not a doctor, but you don't need to be a doctor to understand humans. Lonnie, you're right.
You know, I like you put that. I hadn't really thought about that. If his wife truly loved him,
yes,
she would intervene. But women with an agenda, in a part of the cabal, I guess, allow him to be used as a prop, and that's really interesting because when I think of the important women in my life, women that I've watched from my youth growing up, and my grandmothers, my mom, and other women, and women that have been involved in my life, I can't imagine a woman who really said that she was about my best interest and loved me, allow me to go through that, because this can all completely bamboozle on them and blow up in their faces.
Oh my God! Yes.
If you use the fall apart in front of a camera, and that's a good. That could happen.
It's Lonnie. It's not that far, I sadly think, from happening today. Now, if and when that happens, what will the rest of the media and the other nations do when they realize, all the things he's been pushing in, to date, 51 days,
right,
was that him? And if not, who is running the store? Who is doing it? Leslie is in chat right now. Leslie made a very interesting observation in chat. She says, Biden has the same look of absence my precious mother has. And so I asked back to her, I said, your mother has Alzheimer's? And she says, yeah, she does. So she knows what this looks like. And again, she's not a doctor, but I don't think anybody with any human intuition whatsoever cannot help but see the huge chasm, the difference between the mental fecundity of Trump versus Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to talk about it. The emperor has no clothes. You're being gaslighted. Do not believe your lying eyes. I got about 2 minutes before the bottom of the hour break. I got to get this story in. Because this is Schadenfreude. And folks, if you don't know what Schadenfreude is, look it up at your Funkin' Wagnalls, SCHADENFREUDE, Schadenfreude. This is it. This is from the Bay Area of San Francisco, here in California. Always spell it with a K. I'm just going to read the headline because that's all you need to know. You guys know what's going on in San Francisco, right? There are poop pamphlets to get you around the piles of steaming human poo and excrement in San Francisco. That's at what point San Francisco is right now. Here's the headline. KPIX 5 reporter robbed at gunpoint while covering car break-ins at San Francisco's Twin Peaks. Yeah, I'm not making this up. Be right back after this.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
So Southern Sense is conservative talk with Annie, the radio chick you bellas as host, and C.S. Bennett co-host. Informative, fun, irreverent, and politically incorrect. You never know where they'll go, but you'll love the journey. Annie is a top conservative host on Top Talk Radio and features some of the finest guests packed with important politicians and newsmakers. Listen every Friday, 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern, noon to 3 Pacific, on the SHR Media Network. Remember, Southern Sense is common sense.
Hey, are you guys listening? This is Shannon from Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM on SHR Media. I know you've been wondering where we are and what's been going on. Well, folks, that's right, we're back. So please, join us 7 to 9 a.m. Monday through Thursday on SHR Media, on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and Spotify, and Facebook Live at 11 a.m. on Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM at Facebook. You don't want to miss a minute. We've got lots of guests, lots of segments, and lots of interesting things. And let's face it, there's nowhere for you to go, so you might as well tune in. Again, Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM. We're back live on the air on SHR Media, 7 to 9 a.m. Monday through Thursday, audio and Facebook Live, audio and video. Yes, we are going to do video. Facebook Live, Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM. Hope to see you soon.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And we're back. It's the final half hour of the show. Thanks, everybody, for being here tonight. I greatly appreciate it. The finest late-night conservatarian talk radio show you've never heard of before. It's me, BZ, right here in the saloon. Tonight, my co-host is Lonnie Poindexter, one each. So, thank you again, Lonnie, for being here. I greatly appreciate it, sir.
Thank you, brother.
And also calling in with his medical magic is Jack Alexander, and I appreciate him being here. Like I said, I got about 28 minutes left. I still have time. I didn't think that I had this many happy stories, but apparently I do. This also came out. This is from conservativebrief.com. Another clearly happy story. Supreme Court rules states can charge illegal immigrants for ID theft. And the case argued was, well, they're not citizens, so they can't be charged. Well, the Supreme Court took on that case involving what they call undocumented, illegal aliens, undocumented workers, and ruled that illegal aliens who steal Americans' social security numbers can be charged with a crime, as far as I'm concerned. Oh, hell yeah. That's a grand thing. And then another case. That just, let's see, when was this? A couple of days ago, but I just became aware of it today. Again, an assload of schadenfreude is being writ large all across the fruited plain, and nobody's picking it up. But I do it, because that's what I do here. This is from lawofficer.com. Minnesota politicians redefine the use of force. Bordering North Dakota, now if you don't know, let me give you a little bit of geography here. In the U.S. of A., Minnesota sits to the right of North Dakota. North Dakota is west of Minnesota, and their borders touch, if you weren't aware. So Minnesota politicians redefine the use of force, and North Dakota, which borders that state, North Dakota police decide that they're going to withdraw assistance. Because here's the truth, North Dakota police officials they've wisely decided that they're going to protect their own. North Dakota law enforcement agencies say they're no longer going to assist other agencies from the bordering state of Minnesota after Minnesota lawmakers passed stringent use of force standards outside established U.S. Supreme Court law. The change in Minnesota law seems to have led to an immediate unintended consequence, less assistance and support from North Dakota agencies along the border of the two states. There would have been a time, I'll stop right there, because that's as much as I'm going to discuss this story. let me say this. There would have been a time maybe before 2015 or 2014 when I would have looked at this and said something similar to, I don't know, that's really pushing it. You're saying you're not going to cover your fellow law enforcement brothers and sisters. In 2021, I say, oh, hell no. I'm not letting my law enforcement personnel, because they're mine and they belong to me. They are my brothers and sisters in this state, and I, as a law enforcement administrator, I'm responsible for them. I would not submit them to that kind of scrutiny or exposure to suit or criminal prosecution. Oh, hell no. Lonnie Poindexter, thoughts? Lonnie?
Hey, I was on mute. Sorry, guys.
Oh, well, that's okay.
This kind of thing is one that I struggle with. With your background on law enforcement, you obviously have a clear understanding of is that the way of the world with law enforcement departments from one community or city or what have you to the other, or even state to state?
Historically speaking, depending on where you are, and in California, always spell it with a K, various law enforcement agencies mostly get along really well with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Some have historical contretemps, let's say. There was another county that I used to work for that, for whatever reason, didn't get along with CHP. Now, here in Sacramento County, when I retired in 2016, we had an excellent working relationship with CHP. Generally, historically speaking, cops will cover one another, because if you call for, here it's called Code 3 cover, if you call for cover and you hear of it and you're in another agency and you're not that far away, you're going to roll.
Right.
Now, these days, because of the variable and changing situations that the cops themselves have not necessarily created, but we're having, in my opinion, way too many cop administrators hang far, far left and don't mind hanging their own brothers and sisters' butts out to dry.
Yeah.
Things have changed. Things have changed. Okay. But we're all adults on this bus, including the cops, especially the cops. And if you can't see that having done this to your state, that there are going to be consequences to your actions, you're not an adult.
Right.
I'm curious. With absent, I submit, Lonnie, and again, please weigh in, sir. I submit, adults recognize there are consequences to their actions, and you cannot enable people, in this case, agencies and states, to get away with this kind of thing, or once unimpeded, it will simply continue. Like I've said, those things that get rewarded get repeated, because that's the nature of humanity.
I'm just really curious, as an aside, as to if these types of things are dealt with in the great land down under in Australia. Our law enforcement dealing with some of the same types of things, or is this something that's pretty much pertinent to what's happening in the United States because of the polarization politically in this state? I'm reminded of what took place. Beasy was down in Florida when the individual went in and shot up the school, and the sheriff's department told the officers to stand down, if you remember, and people died. And
Broward County.
Yes. How is this guy even a sheriff? How does that happen? And I got many members of my family that are in law enforcement, and they're just not cut from that cloth. And so it's really interesting to see what's taking place today. And for those of you listening in, and you've got a pretty learned bunch of listeners, VZ, but for those who might be tuning in for the first time, that policy and political policy has far-reaching consequences, and down in the very ranks of those who are there to serve us, and protect us. And when they end up being in situations where they got to start thinking about protecting their own, I don't mean just protecting their own against evil doers, but I'm talking about within the politics of what's taking place. And like what I saw happen in Baltimore, me being in D.C. So this is, it's kind of sad to hear it.
It's very sad. Last year, early, I think it was January, I had the father of, and I cannot think of his daughter's name, but she was 17. She died in Parkland. He wrote a book.
Right.
And he went all across the United States. I had him on the show. I talked to him for 2 hours. Wow. He'd customarily give people a 10 or a 15-minute interview. I spoke to him for a full 2 hours, Andrew Pollack.
Yes.
And despite losing his 17-year-old daughter to the Parkland shooter, whose name I will not repeat because it doesn't warrant repeating, he still came through that and said, I don't blame law enforcement in general for that. I blame some specific individuals.
Yep.
I blame the sheriff at that time, but those policies can be changed. I blame the administrators who pushed those policies through and allowed the shooter, knowing fully who he was, because he wrote about it, he spoke about it, and nobody wanted to direct it. What an individual who can forgive the assassination of his daughter.
Yeah.
An incredible man. Someday I could do 4-6 hours of this kind of thing about law enforcement, and maybe one day I will. But having said this, though, I think, Jack, Lonnie asked a really good question. Maybe you have your finger on the pulse of that. Maybe you don't. I'm not sure, but I won't know unless I ask. Jack Alexander, is law enforcement down in Australia any different, any markedly different from what we're experiencing here in the States?
Yeah, it is vastly different. And I've got the benefit of having a foot in two sides of this. I'm now familiar with the county system, with where I've got the house in Texas and so on, and what's happened there. And I can delve into that in a second. But the difference mostly is here, we don't have municipal or county-based law enforcement. It's all run by the state.
Yeah, it's pretty simple.
So there's it's just the state and federal cops. And because we don't actually have a Bill of Rights in Australia, so, there's no freedom of assembly, there's no right to free speech or to freely practice journalism, or anything like that, certainly no Second Amendment. It's enabled the government to do what most tyrannical governments do when the people don't have the freedoms to resist the narrative. With the COVID lockdowns, they were arresting grannies out walking their chihuahuas and just happened to sit down on a park bench. Yes, you were allowed to go out and exercise your dog and get a little bit of exercise, but you committed a crime the moment Granny sat down on a park bench. And, you went to resist against the unconstitutional lockdowns. But the government just gave themselves emergency powers, which they're still hanging on to, mind you. And they just go in and crack skulls in all of the violence that's happened during the recent COVID stuff, at least in the state of Victoria. In almost every single case of violence at these protests, the violence was instigated by the police.
Yes.
Up until then, they were peaceful. It was people, mostly people that had never protested before in their lives, but whose lives had been turned upside down because of the New York level of restrictions that we've been through. You know, just like New York, they were throwing, COVID-infected people into nursing homes, and then wondering why the more than 800 deaths that we had in this state happened. 95% of them were in nursing homes or aged care facilities. And when families started protesting about those wrongful deaths, they were then getting arrested. They were coming in and arresting pregnant women for typing on Facebook, "I think that the Premier Daniel Andrews, the state of Victoria, is a mindless buffoon." Well, now that's enough to get you arrested under the terrorism laws for incitement.
It's
as an independent journalist during that time, BZ, I was literally scared for my own and my family's safety. So the police powers here are they're not giving up that power anytime soon, no matter how much corruption might be or unconstitutionality behind it, because, it's unconstitutional what they're doing. Hey, you don't have the right to protest anyway. Live with it.
And I can distinctly remember, because I saw the videos, I shared them with you, you shared them with me, we spoke about them any number of times before, and you're absolutely correct about that. This doesn't have anything to do directly with the Minnesota, North Dakota happy story that I just related, but I don't know if you guys have heard this or not. And this has been absolutely buried, but it just came to my attention. And if you doubt me, go to lawofficer.com. Lawofficer.com. I wrote in chat, wait until you hear what I say next. Okay, you guys remember with George Floyd, the officer Derek Chauvin, the former Minneapolis police officer, that trial was paused on Monday after his defense team, they appealed a decision to the Minnesota Supreme Court, and it came back down. Yeah, they're going to add the third-degree murder charge against the officer. Okay, that's a separate incident. Did you guys know that months after the incident, Chauvin's defense team, they found meth and fentanyl in the police car that had Floyd's DNA on it? That evidence had been overlooked by police investigators. They found it now. If you read the autopsy of George Floyd, or if you saw any of the recent videos that were played and been revealed recently on Tucker Carlson, Minneapolis better grab a hold of its shit really quickly, because I submit that prosecutors in this country have apparently learned nothing from Marilyn Mosby and Baltimore and overcharging because of the individuals that were involved in that.
Yep.
It turns out that there was a mistrial and two other, I don't remember which, not guilty verdicts behind that.
Yep.
I submit you'd better cock your hat and get prepared for the fact it's not impossible for a jury, parenthesis, who the hell would ever want to sit on that jury, end of parenthesis, another parenthesis, and that's the point, BZ, to make sure that nobody would want to, end of second parenthesis. But I submit it's not entirely impossible that a jury, depending on how hand-picked it is and whether it decides it's going to go decide and whether it's going to go Simpson and make a stand for jury nullification, that's not impossible.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also not impossible that a jury hands down a not guilty and or a mistrial.
Yeah.
So, folks, especially in Minneapolis, because it's just starting, jury selection is just beginning. They ran that up to the local Supreme Court, came back down, going to go third degree. Okay, I grok that concept. Get prepared. Gird your loins, everyone. Buy your plywood now. This, no matter what, this is not going to end well. Lonnie Poindexter?
I agree with you, my brother. It's I've been talking with some cohorts about that very thing that are from the great state of Minnesota. Said, Lonnie, this could, if it goes that he's acquitted, they're going to tear up the city. And then you have, as you mentioned, Mosby, what she did in Baltimore with the overcharging of the officers, and what it did to that city that they're still trying to recuperate from.
Right, they have. Baltimore hasn't even recovered from 1968.
That's right. Yeah, it's going to be. I'm not often at a loss for words, but I don't have good feelings about this, and it's not about me feeling that the officer should be convicted or anything like that. That's not my point. Let the evidence show what it's supposed to show. But they're already doing their positioning, and as I saw somebody in the chat room say, positioning, anybody on the jury's positioning, potentially they could write a good book off of the outcome of this thing. Everybody's got their hand in the potential cookie jar to make out like a bandit from this. And that police officer who should get justice in the way of let the justice and let the not the laws, but let the evidence state what it needs to state, and let the outcome be what it's supposed to be, and not because of some political agenda.
But well, that's exactly it. I can honestly state, and I hope that everyone else that I knew could state the same thing. You had to keep yourself a little bit separated from your cases, if for no other reason than to be able to willingly say, truthfully say, I don't care where this goes. I'm just going to go there. I'm going to go where the evidence and the story and the witnesses lead, and I will not take one bit of evidence in exclusion of another. If something exculpatory exists, that will be considered. Wherever this leads me, wherever that journey takes me, that's where I'm going.
Yeah.
You cannot go wrong by that. And if the journey takes Derek Chauvin to a guilty, okay, got the evidence, fine. On the other hand, if it takes him to a not guilty, by evidence and or lack thereof, that's okay with me too. It's got to be that way. Paint job, be damned. But still, months, literally months from the summer of hate in 2020, we're just discovering that when they're talking about drugs on board George Floyd, now we're finding additional evidence to indicate, you know what? That just might be true. Leslie in chat made a very interesting, wrote a very interesting sentence here in chat. And I was going to go over this. I didn't think I was going to have time to go over it, but I will now. She said, Antifa have been in our streets with AR-15s for the last 2 days. It's going to be what happened in L.A. all over again. Well, I've got so many tabs up here right now, I won't be able to find the story, but I can tell you essentially it distills down to this. Journalists went over to the area where George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis. Those streets have now subsequently been blocked off by either BLM and or Antifa. The two people that were talking were black gentlemen, so it looks to me like BLM. And they told the journalists, "You're not coming in. This is only for blacks. And if you don't want to get your, I'll say kindly, if you don't want to get your asses kicked, leave now." What that means is that is a no-go zone in the United States of America in 2021. That's where we are.
They have one in D.C. on 16th Street. They're in that area. If you drive through there, you'll find the same type of dynamics taking place. And this is where we are. And so, with Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals, never let a catastrophe go to waste that you can't leverage in some type of way to push forth your ultimate agenda. And you see that playing out with what's taking place in Minneapolis,
right,
and other cities as well.
In concert with Cloward-Piven, the Cloward-Piven effect, which is essentially take all the infrastructure of a nation or a given area and absolutely destroy it. You ever heard of the phrase "build back better," folks, on the Democrats? That's what they're talking about. That's a phrase that comes from the Cloward-Piven effect, which is stress the infrastructure and the system so badly that it completely falls apart. Then you build it back the way you want, not the way it was, but the way you as a leftist want it. That's what's occurring today. I got 5 more minutes left, and I'm not going to hold anybody overtime, and I'm not going to do overtime. I want to get to the one story that I absolutely had to get to before we leave tonight. This occurred, let's see, today's the 11th, except it's the 12th tomorrow on the East Coast. This occurred yesterday, and this is from the New York Post. The headline is, New York school encourages kids to stop using words like mom and dad in an inclusive language guide. And when I read that, I'll be the first to tell you, and I've told you this before, I don't have any kids. None. Zip, zero, the null set. The only kids I have fur. This lit me up like something hasn't lit me up from leftists in a long time. A Manhattan private school aiming to use more, this is a quote, inclusive language, is encouraging its students to stop using terms like mom and dad and parents because the words make, quote, assumptions about kids' home lives. So we're going to, again, due to leftists, we're going to tear the family unit to pieces because some people are uncomfortable. Lonnie?
True. That's the goal. If you look at BLM's mantra and what their goal is to disrupt the traditional family and turn it into something it was never intended to be. Any one of these organizations or the agenda in general is to reconstitute things from God's natural order and change it into something that can be easily manipulated. You can even utilize this the pandemic as another perfect example. So, and that's subject for a whole other show. But no, I get what you're saying.
Well, that's where we are.
I had one of my elementary kids one night. He came to say goodnight, go to bed, and used my name, not Dad. And who said you could use that? Oh, the teacher. So that sort of thing's not just new to New York. And I had a couple of very stern words with that teacher, very quickly. It stopped.
Well, it's got to. Sadly, this is where it's become, and occasionally things are as simple as I attempt to make them in order to streamline life, which is sometimes simple itself. Before I go, I'm going to make a couple of final comments, but before I go, Leslie Holker said, if my children were still young, I'd be homeschooling them. And then I think Sergeant Booker in chat made probably one of the most salient observations just recently. He said, I've been called many things in my life, the name I am most proud of is Dad.
Yeah.
Ring that bell.
I think that nails it right there. And as per normal, I didn't get... I have 2 search engines full of about 50 tabs each, meaning I had about 100 topics to speak of tonight, and I got to about 10, maybe, if that. Because that's the way of the world. That's the way it rolls. So, Lonnie, thank you ever so kindly for being here tonight, sir. I grandly appreciate it.
Thank you, my brother.
And Jack Alexander, you have a radio show. Please tell people where your show can be heard, when, and where.
Okay, it's the Jack Alexander Experiment. It's a little bit sketchy at the moment because of my health issues.
Right.
I've just gotten out of YouTube jail because they didn't like me telling the truth. But jackalexanderexperiment.com. But the one thing I want to mention is that a crowdfunding site has been set up to help with some of my medical stuff.
Okay.
And that website is www.givesendgo.com/JackAlexander.
Okay, I see you're in the chat room. Can you put that link in the chat room, in the SHR Media chat room?
I will do that, yes.
Okay.
And I want to thank Leslie. She was the first one when that went live to jump in and send not only prayers but some help as well. So it's much appreciated.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Lonnie Poindexter. Thank you, Jack Alexander. Thanks to everybody for listening. I'll be back on Tuesday. Not exactly sure. I'm either going to have Kurt Schlichter next week, Tuesday or Thursday. I'm not exactly sure which. We're still in negotiations, and he's saying that he doesn't want the brown M&Ms in the green room. I'm negotiating for the red M&Ms, but who knows about that? I really don't know. I really don't know. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, thanks for listening to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, live and direct right here on the SHR Media Network. If you want to contact me, you can find me on Twitter. I'm really active on Twitter at BZEP, and on my blog at bloviatingzeppelin.net. Promotional consideration is by the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, and also by the Allahu Snack Bar, a little bit of Muhammad in every bite. Tiaras are by My Little Pony. Thanks to my personal KC-135 Kettle One refueling team, with whom I shall be consorting in less than an hour. Take that to the bank. Thanks to Lonnie Poindexter for being here tonight. Thanks to Jack Alexander for being here tonight. Thanks to everybody in the SHR Media chat room. Thanks to you for being in the Facebook chat room and or the YouTube chat room. I'm sorry I don't have enough fingers to manipulate that. Thanks to everybody listening live, listening in podcast. Thanks to the American Trucker. You keep America moving now more than ever. Have a great weekend, everyone. God bless. Take care. Be safe.
Everybody quiet down now and get some sleep.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Ben.
Good night, everyone. Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Good night, children.
Good night, Daddy. Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob. Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.
What's going on? I was asleep. What's everybody doing?
Good night,
Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, and good luck.